going live this morning. Mr. Muffin's Trains, Atlanta, Indiana. I am not talking about trains this morning. I wanted to spend a few minutes and talk about the D-Day invasion in 1944 in Europe when the Allies attacked in Normandy to begin to start pushing the Germans out of Western Europe. This has always been a very emotional day for me. I'm not really sure why. I mean, I got a few ideas, but on June 6, 1944, 36,000 paratroopers, some in gliders and some on parachutes, attacked into Normandy. Just after midnight, they began dropping all over the place, and I'll talk more about that. But they represented Canadians, England, United States, and there were some Poles that also dropped on that time frame. And then starting at about 3 o'clock in the morning, the troops began to board the landing craft to come ashore. And there were 156,000 troops that landed on the Normandy beach on June 6, 1944. And they represented soldiers from 15 nations. I'm not sure you knew that, but there were soldiers from all kinds of nations that participated in the invasion in Normandy, not just the U.S., England, Canada, and the Poles. They were from all over the world, had come to push the Germans out of there. At the end of the D-Day fighting, we had over 4,400 casualties. 4,400 men had died on June 6th, and another 10,000 or so were wounded. Of the 4,400 that passed, about half those were paratroopers that had gotten killed in the landings out of the 36,000, and about the other half were on Omaha Beach. So the beaches, the 5 beaches you probably know, Utah on the very west, and then Point du Hoc and Omaha Beach, where the biggest loss of life occurred, and then Gold, Juneau, and Sword heading north or east. My dad died when I was 4 years old. He had been in the Navy, commanding landing craft, but I believe he was in the Pacific. He wasn't in the Atlantic. He wasn't there for this. My mom remarried a gentleman named Robert Martin shortly after my dad died, and he participated in the landings on Omaha Beach. He was in the 29th Army 116 Regiment, and they were some of the very first troops to land at the beach on the west end. Their job was to go in with the big red one and secure the western edge of the beach. They started loading the landing craft at 3:10 in the morning, and they circled around quite a bit, forming up, and it wasn't until about 4:30 when they left the ship. My stepfather said that they were so seasick they didn't care. They just, let's get in and get it over with. And their first boats from the 116th Regiment landed at 6:36 a.m., and the first 2 groups that land were almost completely wiped out. There were 230 men in the first platoon and first company, and there were 18 left at the end of the day. The group that my stepfather was in, everybody was killed but 3. He was assigned as a radio man for the company and had to carry a heavy radio and all that. And the company commander was very concerned that he would get killed because he was the only guy in the company that knew how to type. And they figured they'd have a lot of reports to type after this was over with. So they moved the radio to another guy and gave my stepdad a carbine. And that turned out to be a really good thing because the boats dropped them way short and he had to swim in. So he didn't have that much weight to make it in. And shortly after they got on the beach, he got rid of the carbine and found a Thompson submachine gun. And that's what he carried through the rest of the war. The second wave arrived about 7 o'clock and in the morning. They could not get off the beach, and they were pinned down, and they really had not had the artillery support they needed, so there weren't big holes in the beach for them to lie in, and they were doing everything they could to hunker down and withstand the firepower. And the third wave from the 116th came in about 9 o'clock, and the commander of that group was able to find a way forward to get them in off the beach. And then next thing I ran into was a minefield just off the beach, and about 15 of them were killed almost immediately as they went off the beach into the minefield. They finally figured that out and moved their way forward. They were loss of life was tremendous. There was some discussion I've read about withdrawing that group from the beach, and that of course did not occur. And they later were further reinforced and continued to move on. So a very tragic day for those guys. As I say, over 2,000 American soldiers were lost at Omaha. If you fast forward for a little bit, Dad and I would talk about this from time to time. He liked to sit in his favorite chair in the living room, smoke a cigarette late at night or early in the morning, lost in his thoughts, and we would chat a little bit. He went on in life. He entered Purdue University and became an engineer, a metallurgist. And the reason he became a metallurgist was because that was the shortest line when signing up for engineering. He was there on the GI Bill. He was married and had a daughter by then, my older sister. And he went on to have a very successful professional life as an engineer. He got several patents. He accomplished a lot of things before he died in 1980. At the 40th anniversary of the D-Day invasion, I was working in Philadelphia, and my second son, Jeff, had just been born. And so we had a family of 4 living there in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And I was riding home on a SEPTA train late at night from my job, and there was only one other guy on the train with me, and that guy was carrying a lot of stuff. And I noticed he unfolded a battle map of the Normandy beaches, right a couple rows in front of me. And I said to him, "Hey, that looks like the Normandy beach map." And he goes, "Yeah." He turned around, and I went up and sat with him. And he was a reporter and a photographer for the Washington Post. And he had taken a train up to Philadelphia, the Metroliner, and gotten on our local SEPTA train at the 30th Street station and was traveling west to Valley Forge. He was joining a group of veterans for a flight to Omaha for the 40th anniversary of the D-Day landings. And we got talking about the D-Day landings, and I knew a little bit more about it than he did, and I was trying to help him with, what was going to occur. And he asked me to join him for the 40th. He had plenty of gear. He needed help carrying it. He was sure the Washington Post would pay my way, and I could travel for free and help him carry his stuff and help him cover this event. And that sounded like a really terrific idea, except that I just had another newborn. I had a wife at home with 2 kids, 2 and under, and I didn't think that was such a good idea. But when we got to I lived in Wayne, PA. When we got to Wayne, PA, he got off the train with me, and I walked home with him and got my car and took him to Valley Forge so he could join his group. There was no taxis out there in the middle of the night. And he called me again the next morning. "Hey, Dad, I changed my mind. We could meet at the airport. He would love to have me go with him." And sadly, I didn't make the trip. But I did watch on TV, obviously, like everybody, CNN, and President Reagan gave an incredible speech there at Point du Hoc, and that was terrific. And I was kind of always regretted not going with him. So fast forward again 10 years to the 50th anniversary of the D-Day landings, and I decided I was going to go. And I was living in Cleveland at the time. My sons were 12 and 10, my 2 oldest sons, and they were Boy Scouts. And so what we did, we packed their Boy Scout uniforms and some flags and our stuff, and took an airplane to France. And from there, we visited. First day there, we visited the French military museums, which were incredible. They had a lot of material on the resistance. One of the things I really liked was there was a young tour guide there, a female, who could speak English, but she didn't know much about the exhibit. And so we walked through the museum with her and explained to her the significance of a lot of the things that were there. And I think gave her some additional background she was going to be able to use as she did tours at the museum. So we had rented a four-door Volvo of some type, and first time I had a car with heated seats, which I found out about because my sons kept turning them on, which was really unnecessary in June in France, I can tell you. And but we traveled up to Normandy, and when we got near on June 5th, we got near the Normandy beaches. The roads were all closed by the French. Police were everywhere, and you couldn't get anywhere close to Normandy. And I had a really good map and noticed that there were some farms just south of Point du Hoc. And it looked like there were farm, like tractor paths between the fields. And so we took the Volvo and followed those cart paths, and that led us all the way to the blacktop right in front of Point du Hoc. And so we took that blacktop all the way to Point du Hoc. When we got there, we were inside French security, and we ran into American Secret Service, and they were looking for bombs and getting ready for President Clinton's arrival. And they were surprised to see us, and of course my boys were wearing Boy Scout uniforms, and and they were super nice to us, and they suggested that there was a field right next to Point du Hoc, farmer's field, that the French were going to park security in the next day, and that there was already a VW microbus sitting in there. And if we could go over there and park next to the microbus, then I'm sure we could spend the night in the car, and we'd be there at first light on June 6th. And so we took our Volvo over there, and we got into the field, and sure enough, there was a VW microbus. And the VW microbus had an American in it by himself. He had left the United States during the Vietnam draft, about my age, and had gone to Canada, and it started looking like he was going to get caught in Canada, so he went to France and happened to fall in love with a young lady that was part of a wine family in southern France, and he then ended up working for them at this wine company. And he had a friend who was in the media, and he got this guy a press pass to be there for Clinton's speech at Point du Hoc. And he had come and parked, gotten in there before security and parked, and he was planning to walk in and be there for the speech. And that was really cool. And he assured us that we could get in with him on his press pass. And so we spent the night in the field there on June 5th, and we learned a lot about red wine. My boys did, and we had a lot of different cheeses and breads, and he had quite a bit of food on board. It was really fun, and we spent the night. And very, very early in the morning, before June 6th, before it got light out, buses and buses of French security were coming to park in that field and to be deployed around the area. And we decided it was time for us to get out of the cars and head to Point du Hoc. Now, if you don't know anything about Point du Hoc was an installation that was supposed to have 6 heavy-duty guns that were trained down on the beach. And some people knew, I guess, that the guns had been removed, pulled back into a field. I don't know why. But nonetheless, the Americans were charged, the Rangers were charged with taking Point du Hoc and capturing those guns, and they attacked that morning on June 6th. I thought it was interesting that the cliffs were 100 feet high, and they borrowed or stole a whole bunch of ladders from a English fire station that they brought with them to scale up the wall. And the ships nearby, Texas and others, provided a lot of firepower to hit Point du Hoc to keep the Germans pinned down while they climbed up. They lost 200 and some troops in the Ranger group. They lost about half in the water on the way there, either drowned or their boats were hit. and quite a few of them made it up into Point du Hoc and secured the area. They went inland. They found the guns. They destroyed them. And then there were a lot of counterattacks, German counterattacks on them. It's interesting when you go there because there are large craters all over the place that were came from the bombardment that the area got from the U.S. Navy. And of course, at this point in time, when we were there, they'd all been grassed in. You know, it looked like a really bad golf course, but it was very pitted out. And we went to security to get in. We were with him in his press pass, and the Americans were providing security for the event because President Clinton was going to be there, and they let us right in when they saw the Boy Scout uniforms from Cleveland, Ohio. So we got in, and the Rangers were providing security for the area. And a couple of the Rangers took the boys on a tour of Point du Hoc and showed them all the bunkers and encampments and so forth and talked to them about that. And the other interesting thing is the helicopter came in and brought a container that was like an emergency hospital room that was set down on the ground in case anything happened to President Clinton. They could put him in there right away and take care of him. And they had doctors and nurses there. And we got a tour of that, too. That was kind of cool. And so we were there in the grandstands for Clinton's speech, which was really terrific. If you ever see any of the CNN clips, I was wearing a bright yellow jacket that I normally wear when I'm fishing. So you can clearly see me in the crowd with the two boys in the Boy Scout uniforms. And so we enjoyed visiting that event. We went on to visit all the beaches for the 50th anniversary. We had flags to plant. We'd brought from the Boy Scout troop, and my sons would see a veteran, an obvious veteran, and run up and say hello to them and ask them if they've ever been there before. And could they tell us about their experience there? And it was incredible. The number of people they met and the conversations we had, it was really memorable. I remember specifically up on one of the British beaches. I don't know if it was Gold, Juno, or Sword, but there were some kind of small British veterans that were aviators. And my sons ran up to them and asked them if they'd ever been there before. And this one guy was very terse, cross, talking to him. And my middle son, who's a pretty smart kid, said to him, "I really like your tie tack." And he picked his tie up and pushed it in my son's face. And he says, "Is that a Hawker Hurricane? Is that what that is, Yank?" And Jeff said, "No, sir, that's a Hawker Typhoon. It's a ground attack airplane that was very important at D-Day." And the guy got really excited that my son knew what a typhoon was. And he yelled to his buddies, "Hey, these Yanks know about typhoons." And the rest of these pilots came over and started to talk to the boys about how they brought their planes forward to the grass landing area right there just off the beach. And they ran several dozen sorties a day from there to go forward and attack the Germans and come back and refuel and rearm and go forward again. And they lived off that beach with their airplanes in tents for quite a long time. It was a lot more efficient than flying back to England to reload and go back there. So pretty cool. On the far end of the line is a town called Ranville, Ranville. I'm probably not spelling it right or saying it right. And there were bridges there across the river and the canal. And it was very important that these bridges be held because the German counterattack would come in through there to basically hit the beaches from the side. And a group of airborne troops, British airborne troops, that they called the unit the Pegasus. And their job was to take gliders in there and land and then go secure the bridges. And that was the first mission that was accomplished on D-Day. The gliders came in and they got out, and they were able to take those bridges and hold those bridges and prevent the Germans from counterattacking through there. The bridges have since been renamed Pegasus in honor of them. And on the 50th anniversary of D-Day, a whole bunch of those guys were there. And when my boys ran up and asked them about, have they ever been there before? They said, absolutely. And they took them on a tour and showed them where the gliders landed and where they went and how they went about their job of securing the beaches and securing the bridges and handling the counterattacks that occurred. And so we had a really terrific time meeting with a lot of the veterans at the 50th anniversary. And I know you probably are aware President Bush parachuted in that day with a bunch of folks from the 101st Airborne, 101st and 82nd, both came in there. And it was just a really exciting experience. One of the things I was really amazed at, like in the States, we have Civil War reenactment groups. In France, there are World War II reenactment groups. And there are large numbers of men wearing American uniforms and American weapons, driving American vehicles, trucks, tanks, half-tracks, everything you can think of, Harley motorcycles. And they were everywhere. And the vast majority of them couldn't speak English. But it was kind of like you were there. I mean, because there were so friggin' many of them everywhere, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Normandy landings. Well, that's my experience I shared with my sons 30 years ago this weekend. And I'll never forget the Normandy landings. Thanks for watching.